Welcome, everyone. Thank you for joining us for today's webinar. My name is Amalia, and I'm a webinar manager at Terminal. Terminal is the world's first tech-enabled platform for remote engineering teams. Today, we're presenting an insider's guide to LatAm's top engineering talent markets. This webinar is part of the Going Remote by Terminal webinar series. Going Remote by Terminal is a monthly webinar series that delivers the insights engineering and HR leaders need to build effective remote teams. Just a little housekeeping before we get started. Today's webinar is scheduled to last about 1 hour. All participants will be muted to enable the speakers to present without interruption. If you have any questions during the presentation, please type them into the question box in your Zoom control panel. We'll have time to answer questions at the end of the webinar, and we'll try to get to as many as we can. We hope to make this an interactive experience for you all, so during the webinar, we'll be asking poll questions. We'll announce polls as we launch them. A pop-up will appear on your screen, and you'll be able to submit your answer at that time. So with that said, I'd like to give our participants a moment to take advantage of an early registration or opportunity for our next event, as well as the entirety of our Going Remote series. 2020 changed workplace norms and accelerated a transition to partially or fully remote work for tech teams. At the same time, as we'll learn in this webinar, talent shortages, hyper-competitiveness, and prohibitive salary costs mean US companies looking to scale tech teams are seeking out new talent markets, often away from HQ. So as talent goes remote, what does this mean for your recruitment strategy? In our upcoming webinar, Skills Head of Recruiting Tom Koning and Terminal's Dylan Sirota will discuss how companies can master the art of remote recruitment. I'll leave this poll up a couple minutes as we finish our intro. After today's webinar ends, we've also prepared a short feedback survey that will show up in your browser window. We appreciate you taking the time to answer these questions, as we'll use them to inform content going forward. Lastly, this webinar is being recorded, and a link to that recording will be sent via email within 24 hours of the event. So, on to our agenda. Today's webinar will start out with a quick introduction to Terminal. Next, we'll talk about why US companies are moving to global markets and bring you some insights on LatAm's talent draw. We'll talk about the top LatAm tech hubs and how to assess them, then bring you some insider tips on hiring in a different cultural context. Lastly, we'll leave some time at the end for Q&A. Now, without further ado, we'll turn the time over to our amazing speakers. A little bit about our presenters today. Tejal is the CMO of Terminal and a veteran tech marketing executive. She's passionate about building marketplaces and leading global expansions. Previously, Tejal led marketing at startups such as HackerRank and Collective Health, as well as marketing leadership roles at Facebook, Google, and Salesforce. Amy leads Terminal's strategic research and analytics approach to global talent intelligence, people science, talent market mapping, new market exploration, and compensation benchmarking. She's closely involved in Terminal's expansion efforts throughout Latin America, and particularly well-versed on tech talent trends within Mexico, Colombia, Chile, Argentina, and Brazil. Prior to Terminal, Amy earned her master's in advanced statistics and analytics at Johns Hopkins and spent over 4 years in talent research and strategic sourcing. Claudia is a talent acquisition expert recruiting out of Latin American markets. Prior to joining Terminal, she held leadership roles in human resources, organizational development, and recruitment in Guadalajara, Mexico, with a focus on IT companies. She's a trained psychologist, passionate about technology and creating opportunities for people to find success and happiness in their jobs. So we have an amazing presentation lined up for you today. So Tejal, I will let you take it from here and dive right in.
Thank you, Amalia. Good morning, everyone. Well, as Amalia mentioned, my name is Tejal Parekh, and I'm the Chief Marketing Officer here at Terminal. Before we talk about engineering hiring in LatAm, I did want to start by giving you a quick overview on Terminal and why we're here today talking to you about LatAm hiring. We work with fast-growing technology companies to help them build, scale, and manage remote engineering teams. Terminal was founded in 2017 and has been funded by some of the most reputable VCs. And to date, we have hired over 500 engineers. Our technology, our platform, and services provide a simple, scalable way to hire engineers across the globe. And we do this through four key pillars of our offering. We use our proprietary market insights to help our clients determine which global markets they should hire in. Our tech-enabled talent acquisition makes the hiring process a lot seamless and a lot faster and just very easy for the companies to hire these engineers. And once these engineers are hired, we also fully manage the ongoing employee operations for these engineers. And lastly, our bespoke programming helps these engineers stay engaged, helps them upskill, and overall helps with the retention of this talent that you would have hired over such a long time, and train them to work on your products. Today, we hire engineers primarily in Canada and LatAm. And so by virtue of what we do, we have firsthand experience with the rapidly changing trends in remote engineering hiring in LatAm. We're really excited to share these trends with you, but more importantly, we also want to share tips and tricks on what you can do to hire talent in LatAm. But before we go into the crux of the content here, let's take a quick poll and gauge, what are your biggest barriers to building engineering capacity? If you can just take a few quick seconds and let us know what's holding you guys back. And while you answer that, just a quick reminder, as we're going through the content, feel free to post your questions in Q&A. We will definitely make sure that we get those addressed towards the end of the webcast. All right, so we have a clear winner, which is hyper-competitive market and hard to find skilled engineers, right? So this is obviously something that that is one of the reasons why we are here today talking about hiring engineers in LatAm. Let's look at the next slide here, and you can see that there is a tremendous shortage in the US market. The market is hyper competitive, and in fact, there are 3 open positions for every full stack engineer available in the US today. This is one of the reasons why there are companies that are looking across the border for filling out their engineering teams. Making the situation even more difficult are the high salaries. The shortage has driven up salaries such that today the average salary of an engineer is $127,000 in Silicon Valley. And if we expand beyond Silicon Valley to other cities, it doesn't get that much better. You're still looking at an average salary of $100,000. These high numbers, again, make it really hard for fast-growing companies to build large engineering teams at scale. The result, US companies are hiring across the borders, which brings us to today's discussion on how you can hire engineers in LatAm. So let's start by reviewing what makes Latin America a compelling market for engineering talent. Well, to begin with, there are over 1.3 million software engineers. And on an annual basis, Latin America is adding 20,000 new engineers to the workforce, which makes the growth rate of that market 28% faster than the US growth rate. And lastly, this is one of the more eye-popping stats, which is there are 30 available engineers for every open role in Latin America. All in all, the net result of all these factors combined together, you get a market that's 3 times less competitive than US. So there's again, really strong case for going into Latin America and considering it for your team. Now, as an advantage, we also see that if you look at the next slide here, we also see that because of the low cost of living, engineering salaries in LATAM are 50 to 60% lower than US, making it a very attractive market for fast-growing companies to hire engineers in. Now, as talent and engineering leaders in the US, you might ask, why set up teams or why set up remote teams and set up teams in multiple markets? Well, there are a few reasons. As you know, good tech talent today is globally available. So it's a smart business practice to not confine yourself to a single market. Secondly, hiring from Latin America allows you to add diversity to your team. And we all know that diverse teams perform better in the longer run. And the last reason, this is the more obvious reason for some of us, which is, Latin America is emerging as a tech leader, and it's prudent to have representation of that market in your team to ensure that you're positioned for growth in the long run. So with that, I want to invite my colleague, Amy Feldman, to discuss how you can unlock talent in Latin America and continue to hire engineers from there. Over to you, Amy.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Tejal. I'm very excited to share some insights into why the Latin American market is really a key market for building software engineering teams now and will remain integral to the future of remote tech hiring. And so in just the last couple years, Terminal's built nearly 20 software engineering teams in Latin America, and many of our clients have increasingly turned to this region for hiring, especially over the last year as the world of remote has taken hold. And so LATAM is already a critical tech talent market, and we really don't see it slowing down. And this is because of the significant venture capital investment in tech in the region, the thriving startup ecosystems that are growing there, government commitments to tech growth, strong educational programs, and overall extremely high growth in the software engineering talent pools there, as Tejal mentioned. So before we dig into some data and insights, we have another poll question here for our audience. We want to know, what are your top considerations and or concerns when it comes to global hiring? Are you concerned about quality of talent, availability of talent, legal and regulatory complexities, the stability of the markets, ease of remote collaboration and communication, or something else? And while we wait for the results here, I know we've seen some Q&A start to come in as well. Just a reminder, again, if you have any questions as we're going through all of the data, feel free to put your questions there. All right, so it looks like we have a a pretty nice distribution, but a tie for quality of talent as well as legal and regulatory complexity. So we'll definitely be addressing those as we move forward here. So to set the stage, jumping right into the next slide, when terminals selecting a global market where we plan to recruit and hire, we consider many different criteria, all of which are related to those considerations that we just highlighted in the poll question. But there are really 5 markers in particular that have proven key to unlocking top talent in global markets. And those are listed on the screen: the time zone alignment, talent availability, location stability, talent quality, and unique supply. And Latin American markets in general, especially the 3 markets we call home currently, Mexico, Colombia, and Chile, are all particularly strong at hitting each of these markers, and each in their own unique way, which we'll dig into. But before we do that, some specifics, before we do that, we want to kind of go into the specifics on these markers so that we understand what they mean and why they matter. So first and foremost, time zone alignment allows us to maximize workday overlap, which allows teams to optimize collaboration, communication, and increases productivity overall. And this kind of goes without saying, but Latin America, aligns directly with central or eastern time zones with the US. So it's been a really promising market for productivity. Talent availability. We ask ourselves, how large is the talent pool? How competitive is the talent market? Do the right types of companies employ the talent there? Is the talent pool growing? All things that indicate, can we actually hire successfully in this market? And Latin American countries are particularly strong in this category because they do not only offer sizable and fast-growing talent pools, the talent markets, as Tejo mentioned before, are a lot less competitive than the US and other global markets. So location stability, the third one there is, we want to know, is there long-term economic stability and growth? What types of startups, VCs, or accelerator programs are present? What do operating costs look like? And are there any regulatory or political risks to operating or hiring in that market? And so relating this back to LatAm, we're seeing significant VC investment in government investment as well into the startup and tech ecosystems of many LatAm countries. And we're also seeing increasing economic stability in the areas in which we operate. When we look at talent quality, we are questioning, are there strong educational programs and universities that are training the talent in this region? How senior is the talent? Are there quality companies to recruit from? And do candidates have strong English proficiency, as just some of the few that we want to highlight? And Latin America is a region that has many globally and regionally ranked universities with computer science programs, most of which also require an English proficiency exam in order to graduate. However, we do also find in this region that some of the most talented engineers are self-taught or maybe have gone through a coding boot camp rather than a university. But either way, a plethora of engineers in the region are trained by US-based big tech companies as well as startups, equipping them not only with the coding skills needed to succeed on an engineering team, but also with the soft skills that they'll need to communicate and also to work remotely successfully. Lastly, we see unique supply. We want to know, does this market offer the types of talent I'm looking for? Specifically, what skills, specializations, and industries are present in this market? And again, Latin America comes out as a top contender because engineers are extremely strong in their foundations of traditional technologies like Java, SQL, JavaScript, and then the more modern technologies, languages and frameworks like Python, Ruby, React are growing very rapidly in the region. So this region's also seeing a wider variety of industries as well as different company types. And this is kind of creating a melting pot, so to speak, of different types of industry and product expertise. So as an engineering leader or hiring manager, your priorities are really going to determine which of these 5 markers matter to you and your organization the most. And at Terminal, our priorities are, we might shift them over time, but one of the key markers that always shows up as a core priority is talent availability. And in Latin America, there are two key market trends within that talent availability theme that really summarize why this market's critical for the future of tech talent hiring and building engineering teams. Trend number one is that LatAm offers a significant competitive advantage over other global markets, especially the US. If you look at the bar chart on the left there, you'll see a comparison of competition by market. And this is indicated by the number of candidates available for every one open role. And so this is the supply-demand ratio of a market, and higher values of this metric indicate lower competition in the market. And we can easily see here that Terminal's 3 Latin American markets are significantly less competitive than the US and even Canada, with more than double, if not triple, the amount of candidates available per open role. One of the reasons, and I'm sure many of you watching today are very familiar with this, one of the reasons why engineering leaders struggle to hire teams in the US is because that candidates per open role metric is 10 at best when looking at greater tech talent pools. And then when you start tagging on specific skills or role requirements, that number nearly always drops into single digits or even becomes a fraction where the job openings are actually outweighing or outnumbering the available candidates. And so this makes it increasingly difficult to not only recruit, but to retain people on your team. So that's a significant trend we like to highlight when we're thinking about the Latin American market. Trend number two, Latin America is the fastest growing region for software engineering talent in the world. You'll see on the right-hand side, the geovisual highlights the annual growth for modern in-demand technologies, which range from JavaScript, Java, and Python to Ruby, React, Node, Go, AWS, and Docker. And as you can see, compared to the other regions shown on the map, Latin America collectively has the highest growth rates across these skills, making it a particularly important market for the future of tech talent hiring. Even if we were to expand this geovisual out and show you the whole world view, LatAm remains the most densely green region across the globe with consistent growth rates at or above 50%. So as you are looking to scale or hire for in-demand technologies, LatAm is going to be increasingly important since its engineering talent pools are large and they're growing at a faster rate than other global talent markets, especially in the US and even in Canada, as you'll see above. So now we're going to take a deep dive into Terminal specific Latin American markets and some of the key benefits they offer as hotbeds of global tech hiring. So just to give some context, in my role as a data scientist for Terminal's business operations, one of the key functions I've supported over the last couple of years has been expansion research strategy and talent intelligence as we've grown throughout Latin America. And Mexico was our first leap into LatAm in the pre-pandemic world, where we built a hub in the city of Guadalajara. And this city is a startup dense tech hub or tech ecosystem that many call the Silicon Valley of Mexico. And since we launched there, we've actually grown to hire remote engineers across the entire country. And we've experienced a lot of different benefits that Mexico has to offer. So you'll see some up on the screen, but just to highlight a few, Mexico not only offers time zone alignment with the US, it's one of the strongest markets in Latin America for talent availability and talent quality. It boasts over 250,000 software engineers who've been trained at US big tech companies like Amazon, Intel, Oracle, HP, and IBM, as well as many successful startups. And while this presence of big tech and other companies makes the market increasingly competitive, it's not nearly at the rate at which companies in the US are monopolizing the talent pools. It's actually kind of a positive. It's very much a positive because this presence enables strong training and skill development for local engineers, and in relevant technologies to boot. And I guess on top of that, really in soft skills, to make working remotely second nature. This is very common for candidates in Mexico because they're used to working for companies in the US or foreign-based companies. They really are comfortable and know how to work remotely and collaborate and communicate effectively. Second to Brazil, Mexico has consistently received the most venture capital investment across LatAm and is home to top accelerator programs like 500 startups, whose program is responsible for ultra successful fintech startups like Clip and Confio. And the consistent investment in the region, the presence of successful successful tech companies, and the sheer size of the economy really does speak to Mexico's overall location stability, making it a very trustworthy hiring environment for your business. So along with the talent availability that Mexico offers, this stability creates market conditions that are conducive for hiring successfully, fulfilling many of the priorities that most companies look for when turning to markets outside of the US. And speaking of location stability, another one of our key LatAm markets, Chile, is known as a go-to market for American businesses due to its long-term economic stability and growth. Jumping right in, Chile's economy is both historically and currently the most stable in Latin America. It offers an extremely business-friendly environment, some of the lowest corporate tax rates and added employment costs in the world, and this has attracted US tech companies for years. And so due to this long-term stability that has allowed big tech and other successful companies to thrive in the market for so long, the engineering talent pool in Chile actually skews more senior than what we're used to seeing in other Latin American talent markets, around 11 to 12 years of experience compared to the regional average of 9 years of experience. So this also makes Chile a go-to market for more seasoned engineering candidates, as well as engineering leaders, and ultimately brands Chile as a key market for talent quality. So Terminals most recently expanded into Chile, and this is not just because it's a low risk and stable market with high quality for talent. It's also a game changer for unique supply because it has become a strong growth market for today's fastest moving and high demand industries like fintech, e-commerce, industries that can be difficult to hire for in general due to the competitiveness in the market. But in Chile, many engineers are trained in relevant verticals and at ultra successful fintech startups like FinTool in that region, or e-commerce startups like Corner Shop, a grocery delivery startup, which many of you are probably familiar, was recently acquired by Uber. So that kind of is the Chile in a nutshell. And while we're on the topic of successful startups, I'll jump right into our third key market in Latin America, Colombia, which is home to LatAm's top funded unicorn startup, Rappi, a consumer tech company focused on online delivery, which has raised $1.4 billion in funding. So after Mexico, Colombia really caught our attention as a key market in LatAm because of the growth we've seen there. And over the past 2 decades, Colombia has built itself as one of LatAm's most vibrant tech ecosystems, now boasting over 130,000 software engineers. What we found even more impressive in this market is Colombia's annual growth rate is 63% for engineers with in-demand tech stacks, which makes it the fastest growing talent market in Latin America and globally. And so this growth, is significant because it future-proofs the country's talent availability marker that we talked about earlier, and it makes it a critical market for the future of scaling remote teams. And Silicon Valley, North American tech hubs, they've also taken notice or started to take notice of this market because we see some US big tech companies there, HP, Oracle, and IBM, as well as some very notable startups like Twilio, Platzi, and Appgate, who are all moving in fast, hiring engineers and giving them incredible training and development opportunities, which ultimately translates to a key indicator of talent quality in the region. So as a hiring manager, if you're looking to build a long-term hiring strategy in LatAm, opening your recruitment to Colombia is really a no-brainer. And this is simply due to not only the size, but also the growth in the market that we're seeing. And then to boot, it's less competitive than the US, and you'll still be able to find engineers who are trained by top organizations and in modern technologies. So before I wrap up here, there are just two additional LATAM markets that warrant conversation. Um, while we're not hiring here currently, Argentina and Brazil remain significant talent markets of interest. And this is because both of these countries boast large engineering talent pools, lower competition than the US. They're known for quality, they're known for senior talent. However, they also present significant hiring obstacles and operational challenges that really make them less able to hit the markers that we've mentioned. So just an example, Argentina has just as many engineers, if not more, than Colombia, and companies have built teams there in the past. But the current status of the market is changing due to the country's socioeconomic situation. It's currently in a state where Argentina is battling unpredictable inflation. There's black market influence, and in addition to that, there's also unfavorable remote work legislation and prohibitive taxes that also remain barriers to entry for US orgs. But this instability in the inflation actually is causing many engineers to flee to other countries, or maybe there's uncertainty in the actual pay rates there for engineers. But a lot of them are ultimately fleeing to countries like nearby Chile, which happens to be one of our key markets and avenues for accessing some of the top talent in Argentina. Similarly, you have Brazil, which offers the largest talent pool in LATAM with over 400,000 software engineers and many top universities globally, but it also poses complex bureaucratic hurdles for operation, and it's significantly more expensive than other Latin American markets. There's higher salaries as well as added employment costs that amount to over 80% of the base salary. So for these reasons, we're continuing to monitor these two countries as well as other Latin American markets, but are really focused on our three key markets that mentioned to unlock talent. And Mexico, Chile, and Colombia alone are really prime examples of why LATAM is so integral to tech hiring now and will be go-to markets for the future of building remote tech teams. So moving on, understanding the high-level trends we know is interesting and helpful. It will get you, but it'll only get you so far, because you really need to be well versed in the nuances and lesser known best practices for hiring in the specific markets. So I'll now hand it over to my incredible colleague, Claudia, who has been living and breathing hiring in LATAM and can give us the real insider scoop.
Thanks so much, Amy. As previously mentioned, I am a manager of talent acquisition for Latin America, and I have 8 years of experience on the region. So I'll be sharing with you some insights about the cultural and hiring norms that it's recommended to follow to have a successful recruiting process. So as mentioned, LATAM, the local talent is becoming really interested in working with US-based companies, mainly to have exposure to new technologies, ways of working, and new methodologies. As well, there's an increasing excitement about the startup culture, and the talent is seeing this as the next career step they want to follow due to stability and the possibility to have technologies that they are not available in their local markets. As well, the Latin market is fully moving to a remote environment, and this is the preferred way to work. Since the market is there and the talent is ready to be hired, it's important to previously enter to a cultural and procedurally different market that will help us to tailor the recruitment efforts to have the right norms for each countries. And with this, we can move to the next slide to talk about the market context. And for this, it's important to take into consideration that the Latin American talent needs to be evaluated based on the local frame of reference instead of using the US recruitment standards, because they don't always will apply to the market. So it's important as well to learn to translate the talent levels. Normally, you will see a gap of 2 to 3 years of difference of experience between a US engineer and a Latin American engineer, because in the US, there's the possibility to have co-op or internships before going into the workforce. While in Latin America, once you graduate, you go directly to work full-time as an engineer. So if you are looking for an engineer with 5 years of experience in the US, that will translate to an engineer with around 8 years of experience in Latin America. Important to be as well aware of that resumes can be different across regions. So they could be a smaller brief resumes, but it's important that if you notice something that has really caught your eye, move forward with the candidate and talk to them, because you can be surprised about their experiences. And based on top of that, it's important as well to notice that the staffing and service organization culture is the trend in Latin America. So the majority of technology companies are under these services, and job hopping tends to be a red flag, but in LatAm, it's typically to see people that are contracted by these type of companies and work for multiple and diverse US-based companies as contractors or temporary engineers. So they'll have, but that doesn't mean they don't have like the full experience working with the startups. They will have exposure to building projects from scratch, to top technologies and trending technologies, as well as working with product and the startup environment as well. Candidates are looking for these opportunities to integrate directly with US employers, to have more stability and having the chance to totally explore the whole cycle of the process and the product development. And as well, it's important to notice that they can have diverse experiences. They also work with freelancers, so they can have side and personal projects that will help you to see more of their work and capabilities. They also tend to do this to have more exposure to new technologies and working from scratch or working with local and international companies. So our recommendation is always to take into consideration these projects and stay receptive to different experiences, because this will bring diversity and different point of view to your team. For this, we are moving to the interview norms. So it's critical to understand the cultural differences, because this will help you to establish the right interview process to hiring in LATAM. So some things that needs to be considered is do not hesitate. As mentioned, the market is moving really fast in Latin America, and candidates tends to have parallel processes. So if you are interested in a candidate, then move quickly with them and to have the top talent that you are looking for. As well, take-home challenges are more well-received than live coding sessions in Latin America, mainly because they are able to work on them over the weekend, because in Latin America, they tend to respect a lot their working hours and their current job. So they will try to and they are totally ensured to give their 100% to the job they are working on, as well as providing the best of their efforts to the recruiting process they are having. So they prefer to have processes and interviews that can be done in less than 2 hours. That way they can be fully prepared for it. And as well, a point that is really important is to make a direct connection. So once you have decided to start a process with a candidate, it's important for them to talk in the early interview with the person that they will report into, because they will bring the boost excitement and engagement they need, having the big picture of the project, knowing what will be their participation and how they can grow inside the company, what is their expectations, how it's expected for them to work inside the company, and the duties from the start. So if you decide to start the process with this interview prior any technical challenge or any technical interview, you'll see that the candidates are more engaged with the process, interested in participating, because they will feel that they connected with the company and with the person they will report into. And for this as well, it's important to take into consideration the complexity of compensation. So in Latin America, people tends to talk about liquid salary or the take-home paid instead of the total compensation. As well, equity is not as compelling as cash and benefits. So we have cases for the same candidate that a company offers equity plus salary or a higher salary and benefits. And the common decision from candidates is that they tend to have the higher salary and benefits that can be more meaningful to them. As well, it's important to take into consideration, as noticed on the right side, that on top of the base salary, you'll see a total compensation cost that is made by payroll taxes, benefits, and all government mandated employment costs that will be on top of base salary. In Chile can go up to 10%, Mexico to 25%, and 35% for Colombia. For this, it's important to consider partnering with a company or an organization that is familiar with the local market and knows the compensation norms. So you will have extra help to understand these complexities and being able to navigate through these tricky waters. And finally, I would like to talk about a case success that we have with Presence Learning. We've been working with them, Terminal and Presence Learning partnership for over 1.5 years since we started operations in Latin America. During this time, we have built a team of 10 engineers and 5 of them were hired within 3 months. The great things about that and the things that we need to highlight about this partnership is that they adapted their processes to the markets we were looking for, that are Mexico and Colombia. So they understand and take into account all the cultural differences. They made a connection with candidates and hiring managers right away to discuss the scope of the work and the company. As well, completing the full recruiting cycle in less than 2 weeks. And we have a direct and open communication across the Presence Learning team and Terminal to align all the expectations, calibration, and ensuring a consistent candidate experience, as well as a great hiring results. So that means that with a little bit of work and help to understand the cultural differences and sourcing and recruiting strategies, you can attract more qualified LatAm engineers to efficiently scale your organization at speed. And with this, I will pass it over for takeaways to Tejo.
Thank you, Claudia. That was a great case study to review. So with the last couple of minutes left, I just want to summarize what we've talked about over the last 40 minutes or so before we open up for Q&A to everyone. So we talked about, US market being extremely competitive for hiring engineers. And it's no surprise that US companies are hiring talent globally. And over the last decade or so, Latin America has emerged as a very compelling option to hire engineers there. Aside from all the other benefits that the market offers, one of the key benefits for US market when hiring in LatAm is the fact that there is a much greater time zone alignment, which makes for very productive and happy teams in the long run. as companies think about entering LatAm, it's not a single homogeneous market. As Amy shared in her insights, LatAm has several tech hubs with several specialties and nuances associated with these tech hubs. So as you think about your expansion strategy, your ideal place to build out your remote team, it'd be important to take into consideration, what are the key skill sets in a given market? What are the regulatory and legislative hurdles that you'll have to address with your business? And overall, what is the strength of the talent pool there? This is also one of the reasons why customers work with Terminal, because we do help our customers navigate through a lot of this when we help them set up remote teams. And then the last part, which Claudia mentioned in a lot more detail, is once you identify your market that you want to enter in, successful recruitment in these markets requires you tweaking your strategies, right? So as Claudia mentioned, in several of the LatAm markets, they would want you to respect their work hours. So keep your interview shorter, or, instead of live pair programming type of interview, try and give them, coding exercises that are more of a take-home exercise. So there's a lot more cultural nuances that one needs to be mindful of to ensure that you're able to recruit and hire people successfully in LatAm. Again, another area where Terminal helps its clients enter new markets and hire people at scale. So with that, I will stop I'll end our webinar here, but we'll open it up to questions that are coming in. I already see a few questions coming in. Amalia, we'll pass it over to you to flag the first one.
All right. Thank you so much, Claudia, Amy, and Tejal, for that discussion and for sharing all of your insights with us. So yeah, we're going to go ahead and take some time for Q&A. So just as a reminder, please do be sure to type your questions into the question box in your control panel during this period. So it looks like we do already have a few questions that have come in. So I think we can start with the first one here from Kate. Kate says, I am seeing much more competitiveness in Brazil, Argentina, and costs not being as different as you mentioned, maybe more of a 30% discount. Are you seeing changes more recently in those markets? Amy, I think that you might have some insights on this one.
Yes, very good question, Kate. I think we started touching on this a little bit while I was chatting about Argentina and Brazil earlier, but just to reference the competition in the market, the true competition or candidates per open role is ultimately going to depend on what you're looking for, specific to the skills, the industry, the product expertise, and things like that. Argentina and Brazil offer a wide variety of different types of engineers, but ultimately, it's important to gauge and make sure that you're targeting the right markets, and maybe it's actually more conducive to open in a Chile or a Mexico if you're seeing it get competitive like that. However, given the state of both of those markets, as we discussed, they're kind of in flux. It's operationally challenging right now, and because of that issue in Argentina where their engineers sort of fleeing to other countries, that makes it a little bit more competitive. In Brazil, it's gained a lot of attention as a really, really strong, large talent pool. But again, that does drive up competition. We also see competition fluctuate throughout the year in sort of a seasonal manner. But addressing then the second part of the question on costs alone, both of those markets are definitely more expensive than the 3 that Terminal operates in currently. Argentina specifically, because of the economic situation right now with inflation rates, they're actually causing engineers to ask for more from a salary perspective than they usually do. And then in Brazil, the number one reason why we're seeing the cost so high there is the added employment costs are just so high. I think earlier we highlighted they're 80% of base salary. So both of those markets, definitely, I think you have a good read on the trends there. I hope that helps answer that question.
Great. Thank you so much, Amy. So we have another market-based question here. So what distinguishes LatAm from some other up-and-coming engineering markets, for example, Africa?
All right, I'll take that one again too. So yeah, we're seeing a lot of, up and coming markets across the globe. You have Africa, Eastern Europe, many parts of Asia that are getting attention as potential hiring markets. And one of the things I'll say for Latin America in particular, I think the game changer here is time zone alignment with the US. And that's kind of number one, because the time zone alignment allows for stronger densities of US based companies there to train the engineers in the region, which bolsters the talent quality. But also potentially even as important as that is it helps with the ease of integrating these engineering teams with the US teams successfully. And like we mentioned, time zone alignment, creating that increased productivity. Not to mention, we are actually seeing when we did our analysis of markets that LatAm is faster growing than a lot of these other markets and has more markets with larger talent pools. So a larger quantity of markets that are kind of contenders, so to speak. And so with those two things, it's kind of a no-brainer to say, LatAm is the number one go-to. That's not to say there aren't other great markets across the world.
Yeah. Thank you. We have a third question here from Pablo. He says, I'm curious to know about your perception of the English language barriers and communication skills across different countries in LatAm. Amy, Tejal, Claudia, does one of you want to take a stab at this one?
Yeah, as Amy previously mentioned, actually right now in Latin America, a lot of universities request to pass an English test to being able to graduate. You can be sure that the engineers and the level of proficiency is good on the English side. As well, we totally ensure that while doing the recruitment, we're tailoring and reviewing in English. So we're having conversations in English, posting in English, and having that information with the engineers. So you can be sure that right now, as mentioned as well, they are used to work for US-based companies and working remotely with this type of companies. So they are also used to have stand-ups, weekly meetings, and more in English. So you can expect B2 to C1 level of English on candidates across Latin America.
Great, thank you, Claudia. Another question asks, I'm interested in using global hires to expand my team, but the complexity, compliance, tax implications, setting up a local entity is a deterrent. So how can leaders take the first steps to build out a global hiring plan?
This is a really, really great question. This process is something many companies we talk to struggle to navigate as they're considering their options for global hiring. We know it's challenging. The risks are high and it can be costly, especially if you don't do your due diligence and research to really understand and select the right market to fulfill your needs as a company. So this is actually why, it's one of the perks of working with an organization like Terminal, because we've done all of that difficult work in entity setup. We can absorb any risk. Our experts when it comes to, the navigating the cultural complexities and market nuances. Not to mention, one of the biggest advantages is you'll get access to multiple markets at once. And this allows you to, diversify your team and or also see which markets are the best fit for your company, given your hiring priorities and your culture. So you can kind of try multiple at once and create this incredible Latin American team that's, filled with people from different countries. Or, maybe you want to hone in on one that's going to be particularly successful for you. And there's the flexibility to do that. So that's my little terminal shameless plug, but we understand the challenges that way. And, getting started is it's always important to start with the due diligence to understand your options.
Yeah, that's a really tricky question. So thank you, Amy, for sharing your perspective there. So it does look like we are coming up on the hour here and out of time for additional questions. So Claudia, Amy, Tejal, before I take our participants through wrap up, I just wanted to thank the three of you so much for making time for this discussion today. And for sharing your insights. It was really great having all three of you, and we do hope to have you again soon. All right, so a couple of quick reminders for our webinar participants. So this webinar has been recorded and a link will be made available to participants within 24 hours of the event. I'd also like to remind you all to please provide your feedback in our post-webinar survey that should show up in your browser window as you leave the call. So thank you all so much for joining us today, and we'll see you next time.